Alright, what's up guys? This is going to be for the final for dance class for part 1. So if you want to follow along here. Starting off, I will show you guys what exactly we're trying to do just through the browser so you have a good understanding of what exactly it is that we're trying to get accomplished. So go ahead and go to Google Chrome. Now what he wants us to do is go to either VirusTotal. In your case, it might be ThreatCrowd, I think was the other one. He wants us to do a URL search. So we're going to put in a URL to this website and it's going to tell us if it's malicious or not. So we can go google.com. Now, there's a total of, well, there's a lot of vendors here. I don't know exactly how many. But out of all these vendors, they all think they're clean. You guys know this, we've gone over this. So that's great and all, but what if we want to take a bunch of URLs like Google and Facebook and search for them at the same time? Well, this isn't possible because it's not registering both of these. It's only registering this one right here. So we want to be able to do that through Python, where we can have many indicators, in this case 9, many URLs, and get the responses at one time, so for automation purposes. So getting started, you're going to want to import the request module. You might not have this on your computer. If you don't, you're going to have to go down here to the terminal and do pip install requests and hit enter, and it might ask you for your password, and you'll enter that. I believe time is already built in, so you won't be needing to download that one, but I could be wrong. But if you don't have it, just go ahead and do the same thing, pip install time. And JSON you will need to go out and get if you don't have it, so pip install JSON. Now after you've imported those modules that we'll be using, you're going to create a list with a variable of indicators or URLs or websites, whatever you want to name it, and you're going to set that variable equal to a list. Now list is going to have all of those indicators. You can just copy and paste that from Dan's file that he sent us. So just put that in there, make sure you have your commas and your brackets. Going forward, we're going to have an API key. What this is doing is anytime that you want to talk to a website's API, in this case we're talking to VirusTotal's API, you need an API key. So if you sign in here, you'll see that I actually have an API key right here, and it's up here, and that's what we're going to be using. So if you guys are on ThreatCrowd, it's going to be similar, but yeah, go ahead and grab that API key, copy and paste it, and throw that into a variable right here so that we can make this requests. Now after we have the API key defined, we're going to go ahead and give our URL right here. So what this is doing is saying the URL equals https virustotal.com. So that's where you want to pull this information from, the link to it. Now what's important is you notice that the path right here is v2 url/report. Now when you go into your browser, it's going to be, for VirusTotal, you can do VirusTotal API, and it will say for developers right here, and we want to scroll down to URLs, and you want the URL report. Go ahead and click on Python, and it's going to look something like this. So going from this is what we want our script kind of to look like. It's going to give it the URL, which we have just explained, the URL that we have just explained, and we're going to need parameters. Parameters give the script a way of grabbing the API key and the resource. Now the resource is the links. So these are all going to be the resources. So if we go to my script right here, it's going to be the URL, virustotal.com. Now we need to iterate through this list of URLs for each one, and we need to plug it into a GET request, and we need to see if they're malicious or not, if VirusTotal thinks that they're malicious or not. So using our for loop, we're going to say for site and indicators. Now for site being every single one of these URLs, the websites, and then in, well, what do we want to iterate through? We want to iterate through indicators. Indicators is our list of URLs. So this is going to go through each and every one of these and do whatever we want it to do under here. So as I said before, we need this params line, which sets the parameters for our GET request. So your API key is going to be equal to your variable up here, which is your API key. Now you could just type out your whole entire API key right here, but it's better to store it in a variable. Now your resources are going to be the site, because the URLs are each of these, and the site essentially is each of these. So params, and then the response. Now this right here is the meat of the whole script. The response is using the request library, so we do request dot, and then we use the get term, the get function, and the get function is going to take the URL, which is right here. It's going to go and get virustotal.com, the URL report, and it's going to use the parameters we have, which are the API key and the site, each one of these, and it's going to get that information whether or not those vendors think it's malicious. Now under the get response, under the get request, we're going to set a variable so we can access that information. So right here, this line, that's great. Now we've gotten those that information. Well, what do we do with it? We need to put it in a dictionary, and the way to do that is to use JSON. Typically when you go out and reach an API, it gives you information in JSON format, which looks similar to a dictionary with a key and value pair. So we're going to use the JSON.loads function, which will represent all of this data in a dictionary. And what are we loading? We're loading the response.content. Now the response is going to be the request that we got. So it's going to be all the data that we just got, whether or not those vendors think it's malicious. This is printing it to a dictionary. Now that we have that data, we're going to do conditional statements to determine if they're malicious or not. So we're going to start off with if the response being whether or not those vendors think this malicious or not. The positives is greater than or equal to 0, then we're going to do this. Now I'm going to have to explain this right here. I know it looks confusing, but it's really not. So the way that VirusTotal determines if vendors are malicious or not is by positives. If the positives in the JSON dictionary are anything greater than 0, it means that at least one vendor thought it was malicious. For example, it will say positives equal 5. And what that 5 means is 5 vendors out of all of those that we saw think that that link is malicious. So what we're saying right here is if the response, the positives, is greater than or equal to 0, then what? Well, then we're going to open a new file, we're going to append to that file, and we're going to write the site and write not malicious. So we're determining if the positives is greater than 0, that means at least one vendor thought it was malicious. We're going to open a file and we're going to write the URL and then not malicious. It's not malicious because less than 0 people thought it was malicious. So if we go into, pretend I already ran this, and we go into this is going to be the file that we're opening, the VT results. if we look at all of this information, it's giving the URL and it's saying it's malicious. So that means the positives were greater than 0. At least one person thought it was malicious. The second one right here, it's not malicious. So as you can see, this format, it has a link, dash, not malicious, or a link, dash, malicious, and so on. So if we go back to our script, we can see that we're just doing that with conditionals. So if webzel.net, the positives are greater than or less than or equal to 0, we're going to open that file and we're going to write the site, which is URL, so we're writing the URL, and we're going to write not malicious. Now, elif response JSON, the positives are between 1 and 3. We're going to print maybe malicious. That means that 1 to 3 vendors think it's malicious. 3 people out of like 70 that may or may not be malicious, so we're going to write maybe malicious. When I ran this, I'm not sure if any of them were maybe malicious. I'm not seeing any, so that's not even applying to our script. But what is if the positives are greater than or equal to 4, we're going to write malicious with the URL. Okay. Now at the very end here, we have an else statement which finishes our conditional. It's saying, or else, print URL not found. That would mean if you insert some gibberish into the GET request, it would print URL not found. Now what's really important about this script here is we're accessing the time function. So if you guys remember from what Dan said, you cannot access more than 4 requests at a time with VirusTotal. With the Community Edition API, you actually have to pay more to get more requests at a certain time. So if we didn't have this right here and we tried to run this script, it would give us an error because we're trying to access 8 different searches in less than a minute, and the limit is 4 per minute. So this is running through and it's running one at a time. So it's saying for the URL in indicators, do these things, and then we just want you to sleep 15 seconds before you go on to the next link. That way you're only getting, so you do, this one goes, and then it waits 15 seconds, and then this one goes, and then it waits 15 seconds, and so on. So if you're at 4, 4 times 15, I believe that's 60 seconds, so you're never going to get that error. So and that needs to be within our for loop, the time, .sleep, 15 seconds. If you type 60 seconds, that will be a minute, so that's what you type within there, but anything greater than 15 seconds will be just fine. So that's the entire script. If I went ahead and ran this, well, let's go ahead and delete everything in here first. So this is that file that we're writing to. We're going to delete it, and we're going to go back to our script. We're going to right click, we're going to run this script. And what you'll see here is it's actually running, but you're not seeing anything because it's appending to that file. So if you see here, this red stop button, that means that the Python file is currently running. So because we have that 15-second timer in, it's going to take roughly a couple minutes, whatever 15 seconds times 9 is, to just over 2.5 minutes. So here shortly you should see that it stops running and it will say process finished with exit code whatever, and then you can go ahead and open this file and look at that. It's running through those URLs and it's printing it to this file just like I told it to. So here in maybe a couple seconds we'll see another one update. So go back here. But yeah, just pay attention to the if, the elif, and the else statements. Look at the formatting and just try and understand, we're just saying if the response is less than or equal to 0, it's not malicious. If the positives are greater than or equal to 3, or between 1, it might be malicious, and if the positives are greater than or equal to 4, it's definitely malicious because at least 4 people thought it was malicious. Now let's go here to our file, and would you look at that, we have a couple more added. So that's part 1 of the final, explained as shortly as I could.